So, hi everybody. I'm really sorry that we're late, and I'm glad that you're with us. A lot of technical and coordination issues to deal with when we do these live streams. You know, it's a lot easier just recording and then playing it later, but it's fun to do the live streams because everybody can see it as it's happening in real time. And it's kind of exciting to be able to do that, especially with all these exciting and inspirational people that we're finding to be on the show worldwide. So tonight, what we have is I have to introduce the idea that I'm not really a political person. You know, I don't have any label of Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative or progressive or anything like that, because I like to be able to look at things as they are with no labels. And for me, that works a lot better. But I'm open to people from any part of the political spectrum who seem to come across as really honest and sincere, and especially the most valuable, they're doing it to try to help humanity, help the world. And even if it's totally local, you know, they're doing it in a way that's the motive. And that, to me, that's what is really spectacular. So once in a while, we get recommendations might fit that profile. And recently we got a request for me to try to contact a Senate candidate, U.S. Senate candidate in Washington State named James Deal. And I was able to do that. He's got a website that we'll talk about with all kinds of neat resources on it that I want you to be able to see in videos and explanations and his position on issues and all kinds of stuff. And that's another thing, is that most candidates who are not totally sincere, not doing it for the right reasons, they try to make all their positions so that they seem right to everybody and just don't offend any point of view, no matter what you say. And that's how they engineer what they come across with. And James doesn't do that. He actually says what he thinks. And we're going to go over some of those things that are explained on the website, which, by the way, is jamesdeal.org, if you want to look at that. And it's fine to be watching it while you watch the show if you want to. So James is not only an extraordinary political candidate by way of sincerity, honesty, and openness, but he's also the author of a really interesting book, What to Serve a Goddess When She Comes for Dinner. And it's also called A Theology of Food. And I thought that's really interesting. I've never heard that phrase before, and I think James invented it, and he can tell us if that's true. So we have a lot to talk about. The book is more than 400 pages long. I've read a lot of it, but not quite all of it. Certainly enough for the first 20 hours of our discussion, but we're not going to need that much anyway. We're going to give you a feel, and then you can look into it further on your own. So I just want to welcome James and really thank him for giving us the time in the middle of all of the things that he's trying to do. And we're going to have a fun discussion that hopefully all of you guys will enjoy. So welcome, James.
Thank you. This is James Robert Deal in Linwood, Washington, and the website you should look at is jamesrobertdeal.org. Remember the middle name, jamesrobertdeal.org. And /platform gets you to my campaign platform, and /radio gets you to the Sunday night radio program at 8 p.m. every Sunday night. And I think I'll continue that after the campaign is over. And so Richard mentioned the book. It's about the history of food. This goes back as far as we can trace it, and goes back to Pythagoras, who was a very committed vegetarian. And the evidence is overwhelming that the first Christians came out of the Essene movement and were vegetarians. So I understand that I'm not going to convince the world to be vegetarian, but we could all eat more vegetables and raise animals in a more humane manner and make meat our dessert instead of the main dish. And the problem with eating fast food is that it's Roundup food. Your hamburger, your cow ate Roundup corn and Roundup soy, and so did your Kentucky Fried Chicken. So you're eating Roundup chicken and Roundup hamburgers. Now, if Monsanto had a code of ethics that was of any substance, Monsanto would voluntarily say, we're not going to sell that product anymore. But they're fixated on this cash flow. Once a cash flow gets going, it has a mind of its own, and it becomes a form of artificial intelligence. Now, Stephen Hawking, who just died a few months ago, warned us about artificial intelligence, and he spoke of it as something in the future. And it seems like he was presuming, I think most people presume that artificial intelligence will be something that's in a computer. But no, artificial intelligence can be a correlation of forces even before computers were developed. As soon as the modern corporation came into existence and acquired some legal rights through unfortunate Supreme Court decisions, then the container for the artificial intelligence was established, and corporations have limited liability so that the individual shareholders, the most they can lose is the amount they've invested. So, and then you hire people and you tell them that they'll lose their job if they don't increase profits every year, and you've got a setup for correlation of forces that becomes irrational and not focused on the needs of human beings or the animals or the environment. And that's what we have, and computers are just making it worse. And so we have a situation in this country where democracy is really threatened. And it's not just one party. It's both parties need big money to run their campaigns, and so they sell out to pretty much the same sources of money. So the big contributors contribute to the candidates, and in return, the candidates, when they get elected, appoint friends of the big corporation to run the administrative agencies. And really, the agencies are extremely powerful. And so they kind of look the other way.
They also make their own laws, essentially. They call them policy, I think.
It's totally out of control. So on jamesrobertdeal.org, if you go there, you'll see a carousel going by. And one of the items is campaign and election reform. So I've tried to propose solutions to problems like this that are more comprehensive. For example, the one on traffic congestion proposes a total solution to traffic congestion, making it possible to get around without owning a car, reduces the number of cars on the roads, and thus reduces carbon emissions. I take the same approach when it comes to campaign reform and finance reform. I've got a proposal on jamesrobertdeal.org, and basically, we need to develop ways to campaign that are fairly inexpensive to the candidate. So instead of one voter pamphlet, there would be a succession of voter pamphlets every week. And then the state would buy a 5-inch by 5-inch ad in newspapers, and which would help newspapers, which are important and which are failing, so that a candidate who doesn't have a lot of money could mount his campaign in a credible way, and also provide them with a basic website so they can communicate, and a way so that they can collect money. And you'd prohibit corporations and maybe unions from contributing, because they're not individuals, and only individuals should be able to contribute, and the campaign contribution should be limited. And then instead of just having a primary and a final in November, what you would do is you would start in January. And if a candidate for a local office got X number of signatures, then he's on the first ballot. And then he starts receiving the subsidy, which is in the form of the voter pamphlet and articles in the newspaper and advertisements of debate held on TV, which is a Washington State television network. Or it could be on the national network, what's it called, that the cable industry supports financially, so that the candidates would be available and possible for them to present their campaign without vast amounts of tricky, expensive, tricky ads on TV that are more manipulative than informative.
Okay.
So what do you think about that so far, Richard?
It sounds good. I think right now it's clear that if you're not really well off financially, you can't run for any national office, and you can't run for some of the state offices, and locally too. What I notice, in my own observation, is that it's not just the people with a lot of money and resources who can run locally. It's people who are connected to the powerful players in the local environment, and I'm not sure how to overcome that. Like what they call superficially the good old boys club, whichever party it is.
You almost prefer the candidate who's a multi-billionaire, because at least he doesn't have to sell out to anybody, but the person who doesn't have money sells out in order to get the money.
Exactly, and you may have to agree to all kinds of things behind closed doors. So
now my opponent is not all bad, but she was, at the beginning, a longtime supporter of smart meters. And if you go to jamesrobertdeal.org, there's a search magnifying glass there, and you can search for Maria Cantwell. So I don't want to demonize her, but on the other hand, she's a sellout when it comes to smart meters. I'm not sure she understands the scientific issues and the harms that are going to be caused. And I've yet to hear any kind of response. And when you look at her page in the voter pamphlet, it doesn't say anything about that. But she is a longtime supporter. And, she did come out of that type of environment, that industry, because she was Real Network's vice president for a while. And the problem, of course, with if you go to jamesrobertdeal.org/smart meters, smart-meters. So it's cumulative. It's not just the cell phones up to your ear. It's not just the cell phone given to the baby to play with. For God's sake, put the cell phone on airplane mode. Certainly you could download some little videos for the child to watch, or maybe some game that doesn't require an internet connection. And most of the time, when you're in your car, put your phone on airplane mode, because inside the car, the cell towers are searching for your phone, and the phone is searching for your cell tower. So the broadcast comes inside your car and bounces around inside of it.
It's an inexpensive way to make a microwave oven, right?
It is a microwave oven traveling down the road. Now, in the future, we're going to have self-driving cars that use radar and LiDAR.
Right.
So thousands of cars, tens of thousands in a short trip, are going to be aiming their radar and their LiDAR at you. And you're going to be aiming your LiDAR and your radar at them.
Yeah, why don't you tell people what LiDAR is, because most of them don't know.
It's at a different frequency. It's a laser. It's a laser light, and some of the lasers are at frequencies that are outside the visible spectrum. So you don't know when there's LiDAR shining right in your eyes. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know everything about all the different frequencies and which are the most dangerous. But again, back to the point that it's the total amount. So we started out with car phones, which were actually fairly safe because the antenna was on the outside of the car. And then cell phones came along, and they really never were tested for safety. So the only standard is, do they heat water? And if they don't heat water, then they're okay. And the studies haven't been done. And the reason why the studies haven't been done is because the big contributors don't want the studies to be done, because they might prove that the cumulative effect is bad. So then we've got cell towers. We know that some people are very sensitive and we call them the electrosensitives, and they're mocked, and they're accused of being malingerers. And there are researchers who run these tests to prove that they're making it up. And what they do is they have a sealed room, and in one room there's a cell phone that's off, and in the other one there's a cell phone that's on, and the subject can't tell the difference, and so they say, that proves that they're malingerers. They're just making it up. But if you've been hypersensitized in some way, there are many ways to get hypersensitized. Maybe you took fluoride pills when you were a child. Maybe you were overexposed to some chemicals. This type of sensitivity could apply to hypersensitivity to microwave radiation. And so some people have obvious reactions, and these are the canaries in the coal mine. They're not malingerers, and we should pay attention to them instead of mocking them. We should be putting our research money into maybe finding frequencies and power levels that are not harmful, or at least more tolerable. And a lot of people talk about using earbuds and airbuds, tube buds, and keeping your cell phone as far away from your face as possible. But in starting my study of smart meters, I decided to make much less use of it and just keep it on airplane mode, and every 15 minutes or every half hour, turn it on, check your voice messages, make any necessary calls, check your email, and turn it back off, because we lived quite nicely for thousands of years without being totally in touch all the time with everybody and anybody. So schools should ban Wi-Fis because everything is fixed in place. There's no point in having a Wi-Fi. If you can run cable, or you can have the computers lined up against the wall where it's easy to connect. At home, totally turn off your Wi-Fi. Now, one good thing I can say about the older iPhone is that you can actually plug it physically into a Category 6 cable. You buy a jack, it's called Lightning to RJ75 or RJ45. And so you stick a Category 5 or Category 6 cable into one end, and then stick the other end into your iPhone. And now you could do everything on your iPhone that you could do through the air. You can upload your updates for your apps. You can upload your iOS. The only thing you can't do is dial a number, but you can use Skype, or you can have Facebook, and you can use the Facebook Messenger. Now, with Android, you can do the same thing, but you really have to research it because it's not worked out yet. But somebody needs to put pressure on the cell phone companies and say, look, guys, we need a button on the cell phone that's really easy to flip it into airplane mode so that people could leave the cell phones on airplane mode most of the time. It's not really easy. You have to go into your cell phone and look for your setup and put it into airplane mode. So it's not easy, but probably better just to turn it off if you're driving, and it would eliminate the distraction. So give me some feedback, Richard. Should I say more about, 5G? You want to hear about 5G?
Yeah, I mean, before you do, I just want to say that one of the things I really liked about what was on your site is that you've taken the time to really understand not just one environmental issue, but quite a few of them. And those are really important to me because I'm not thinking of myself as the typical environmentalist, which has certain points of view which they're supposed to think and not others. I just feel like it's our life support system, and to not take care of it is not very intelligent. So you don't need a label, you just need to see. It's like, this is what we depend on to stay alive. So everything that relates to it and impacts it is really important. And it's amazing that almost no candidates take any time to understand it. So I appreciate that.
The candidates are experts at getting 50.01% of the vote.
By saying nothing significant, yeah. but making you really like what they say. Very, really positive and really cheerful, and say, yeah, we're going to get lots of money for our district from the federal government or something like that. They figure everyone will like that. And we've got the right position on the issues. Just don't talk to us about what they are, but don't worry about that part.
Well, Maria says that she's in favor of internet neutrality, which sounds pretty good.
Sounds fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, well, everybody should be in favor of that. But if we had fiber optic to every house, would really, internet neutrality wouldn't be an issue, because we don't have a super highway
much faster
to the house.
One thing I want to interject before I forget is that I found out from some research and some guests we've had on that most of the country already has a fiber optic system installed. It does not have to be done from scratch.
Yes, and let me tell you a surprising fact about the new 5G, which is going to be a so-called small tower on every block, or 2 or 3 of them on every block.
Small sounds unoffensive, really.
Yeah,
sounds great.
Well, it's smaller than the gigantic ones and not as high, because it doesn't broadcast as far, because you're at higher frequencies. Is that for the 5G towers to work, they've got to be interconnected with fiber optic. So there's going to be fiber optic to the 5G tower outside your window, but why not bring it a few more feet right into your house?
I think they forgot to talk about that part. It must have been a time consideration. They just didn't get to it.
Well, I think that what big wireless thinks just in its little wireless box.
And so if they mentioned that the fiber optic was in, somebody might put the dots together and say, wait a minute, what was that middle part about the fiber optic system already being installed? What if you took it 20 more feet to the house?
Right. Then if you want a Wi-Fi, you could have your home Wi-Fi on, so that you could sit in your backyard by the swimming pool and watch a movie.
Yeah.
And most of the use that's to be made of 5G is just watching video online. They want people to be able to watch their sports through their cell phone and get fried.
And download 10 movies at once in less than 5 seconds, if possible.
Yeah, it's I guess if we were all machines, it would be fine. But this type of super fast through-the-air connection would only facilitate the rise of the what are those convertible type of robot monsters that they make movies about?
Cyborgs or something like that?
Not the cyborgs, the ones that open up and then convert it from a car into a giant monster.
Oh, are you talking? Is that what, like the Transformer idea?
Transformers, yeah. If the world were inhabited only by Transformers, then 5G would be the perfect solution, because then you could interconnect them all. But we're not Transformers. We're vulnerable. So, like I say, it's the total. It's the baby monitor. It's your cordless phone. It's your cell phone. It's your Wi-Fi at home. It's your Wi-Fi at school. It's your Wi-Fi at college. Your Wi-Fi at work. In the hospital. Everywhere. I mean, then it's the cell towers. So,
and while you're eating your hamburger helper, getting over the operation, you can be radiated at the same time.
Isn't that convenient?
Yeah.
So how do you wake people up? I'm trying every method at my disposal. Now, as an attorney, we're supposed to do pro bono work. So this is my chosen pro bono work, is to try to wake people up.
Yeah.
I have a website, I have a campaign for office. The filing fee was $1,740. And so I get in the voter pamphlet throughout the state. That's like 1 million, maybe 500,000 voter pamphlets, because only 6 of the 39 counties still have the voter pamphlet for the primary. When the big recession started, the Great Recession, they terminated the statewide voter pamphlet for the primary. And then when the economy recovered...
So you're just supposed to use your intuition for who might be good by what their name sounds like and stuff like that?
You don't know anything about the candidates until you get your ballot, and all it has is their name. It doesn't even have their website.
Wow.
Now, the 6 counties that have the primary voter pamphlet are the most populous counties. So I'll be reaching most of the people through that.
Good.
And I'm not bashful about saying that, there's 2 sides of my life. One is my ethical calling, which is to wake people up about these important issues, but also I'm in business. I'm a real estate broker.
Right.
And the for-profit side of my work supports the nonprofit side, and vice versa. That's why I'm not shy about saying, if you're in the state of Washington, I'm a broker.
Yeah, I think you can say as much about that as you want, because one of the important things is connecting money with good causes. And this is a good system that you've got, where you do something that people need, get money for that, which is, I'm really in favor of free market capitalism, but not through businesses that hurt people. And if you've got something that is useful and actually gives a service that they want, that's a great way to take in money that's completely ethical. And then you can put it into all these great projects that you're doing. So whatever you want to say about the real estate stuff is great, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. The real estate website is WashingtonAttorneyBroker.com, and I work throughout the state. And I like to co-broker with other brokers. I'm not competing straight up with them, except in my little local area. But statewide, if a broker has a complex transaction, bring me into the deal for 1%. I'll take care of all the legal problems. And it's fun. It's more fun to me than a regular practice of law, which involves going to court. I don't like that at all. It's just so adversary. Now, the other big issue for me has been drinking water fluoridation, fluoridated toothpaste, and fluoride in the dental office. All of these are profitable frauds. And
why don't you explain, because most people think, well, your teeth would all get soft and fall apart if you didn't have fluoride. So what do you say to those people?
There are other and better ways to protect your teeth. The most fundamental way is to carry a toothbrush in your pocket, and you don't need toothpaste. And whenever you've eaten anything, just use water, get that stuff off your teeth, because that's food for the Streptococcus mutans, which is the variety of bacteria that breeds on your teeth. Now, the fluoride that gets on your teeth is a very weak ionic bond, calcium fluoride, and as soon as you drink or eat anything slightly acidic, it comes right off and you swallow it. So with the fluoride toothpaste in your mouth at 1,500 parts per million, you're absorbing it through the small soft tissues of your mouth, and whatever sticks to your teeth and your gums, you swallow it during the day. And if you look at the label, it says, don't use it with kids under 6. And if you swallow more than a pea-size amount, that's how much you're supposed to use, a pea-size amount. Call poison control. So it's the supporters of fluoridation say, they come out with studies that say it reduces tooth decay 25% or 18% or 15%. I've never seen a pro-fluoride study that said it reduced dental decay more than 25%. What about the other 75%?
Right.
Usually the supporters of fluoridation have a one-note song, and they don't say anything about the other 75%. But the sugar industry was really big in promoting fluoride in the drinking water. Then in 1950, Crest toothpaste came along. Well, first it was called Fluoristan, and they changed the name to Crest. And you're putting a dangerous, toxic substance in your mouth. There's a quota, just like with microwave radiation. There's a certain amount of radiation you can take, spread over a certain amount of time. But sooner or later, you're going to get brain cancer like John McCain, and holding it up to your head just makes it happen sooner. If you hold it away and you do it for long enough, and you're subjected to Wi-Fi at home and Wi-Fi at work and Wi-Fi at school and smart meters everywhere you go, your whole neighborhood inundated. The word is, it adds up.
Right.
Cumulative. The effect is cumulative. Right. So with fluoride, the body can protect itself to a certain extent. A healthy adult can excrete 50% of the fluoride that you swallow. The other 50%, it deposits safely inside your bones, where it stays forever and can't do any harm because it can't come out. However, the bones can only safely hold so much fluoride. When it gets up to about 1,500 parts per million, you get brittle bones, and you get bad joints, and you get arthritis. And then when you get sick and your kidneys don't work very well, your kidneys can't excrete anymore, it starts building up. If you ever go for kidney dialysis, they do dialysis with non-fluoridated water. What does that tell you? So then they say, the poor lady, 70 years old, she fell down and broke her hip. No. She broke her hip and fell down. Her brittle bones broke as she was walking along, and she fell down. Now she's in a bed. She can't, she's bedridden. She's going to get pneumonia. It's a death sentence if you can't get out of bed.
Yeah, the interesting thing too, James, is that in the CDC's website, they make the claim that after fluoridation, and you know the idea that correlation is not causation, right? Everybody talks about that. In other words, two things may happen together. It doesn't mean A caused B, just that they tend to happen together. So in the CDC website, it says that when fluoride started being used in the U.S., tooth decay went down, and they show the graph. If you take that further and do a little more investigation, at that same time in countries that never fluoridated, the tooth decay went down the same amount. So there were other factors, and as far as I can see from that line of investigation, there's no reduction in dental decay from the use of fluoride, and they've known it from the beginning.
That's true.
They just know nobody's going to check.
Now, this is my fluoride broadsheet. I started producing these in 2005 when there was a fluoridation war in Whatcom County, which is up the north part of the state. And I studied it. And so I write these summary pages for different issues, and I post them. And you can access this one by going to fluorideclassaction.com/safe water. fluoride-class-action.com/safe water. And you can also find this if you go to jamesrobertdeal.org. There's a reference to it on the carousel going by. No, it's another example of a cash flow getting going, and it's hard to stop. And it has a life of its own. And there was actually a fluorine lawyers group, and when I go talk to a city attorney for the city of Everett, they were shocked when I told them the basics. And so I came back to visit them, and they had talked to the dental school, and there's a point person there appointed who somehow used manipulation to convince them, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's just fine. It reduces tooth decay. Right. But lawyers, can be hired to be paid liars. So I wouldn't put any stock on that. So fluoridation ranks up with tetraethyl lead. So look, some people don't believe that there are such things as profitable frauds, and they're so trusting. They believe that we're being protected. Cell phones are safe, and Wi-Fi is safe, and smart meters are safe, and fluoridation is safe, and all the vaccines are safe, because they wouldn't do that to us. Well, I got news for you. Yes, they would, because the mechanisms exist, the correlations of forces exist that to perpetuate the cash flow. The donations to the congressman, and the congressman appoints people in the agencies, and the same thing on the state level, and the same thing on the city level. Right. And then we've got Delta Dental. You pay Delta Dental, we pay Delta Dental, not Delta Dental, but an equivalent dental insurance program, $35 a month. And all we get is a deduction, reduced price. It's like a marketing scam. But with all this money Delta Dental collects, what it will do is it will pay for the initial fluoridation equipment to fluoridate a city. And so they signed a contract with Port Angeles that said, we'll put up to $2 million for your initial fluoridation facility, and you agree to maintain fluoridation for 10 years. And if you ever stop, you owe Delta Dental $2 million. So,
well, that shouldn't affect them at all, right? Their
so
objectivity,
the 10 years expired, and the Safe Water people in Port Angeles persisted. And after the 10 years passed, the fluoridation was stopped. They realized that the fluoride had eaten up the equipment. I went into one of these fluoridation facilities, and I ran out. I took one breath, and it stung, and it stank. And the windows are etched. This stuff, this fluorosilicic acid, is toxic waste from the production of superphosphate fertilizer, and it's a totally unnecessary product because you don't need superphosphate fertilizer.
You know, as
organic farmers, go ahead.
Well, there's so much to say in this stuff. I was just going to mention that
enormous.
As a free market capitalist person that I am, I would say this is a business that should be illegal. Yeah. And I wouldn't just wait for city by city to try to figure it out. If I was in charge, which I'm obviously not in charge of anything, but if I had that option, I would say all of the heads of it that are promoting it within local governments and within the industry should all be indicted for crimes against humanity. So this is not something that's a legitimate business as far as I'm concerned.
The city attorneys say they don't have to worry about individual liability. Now,
because of what?
They just say that. I haven't done an analysis of the possible criminal liability, but it is definitely an assault. And when an assault is committed by a government, it is a violation of the 14th Amendment. And now, one thing about insurance, going back to the smart meter issue, is that if you're a business owner, if you're Richard and you've got a business, your equipment, I've got two insurance policies, one on the house, the homeowner's policy, and then I've got a business one that insures the computers. And so I studied the insurance policy, and it specifically excludes coverage for surges. So the smart meters are not grounded, not sufficiently surge protected, and they produce straight current. So if you've got $1 million worth of equipment in your business, you're probably not covered if there was a surge. And here's how surges, there's two ways surges typically happen. One is the tree falls across the lines, and two 240 volt lines cross, and now you're at 480, and it hits the smart meter, which doesn't have a ground. It doesn't have a path to ground. So the absorptive surge protector in a little smart meter, which is plastic, is only good up to 300 volts, and it blows up. It catches fire, and your house burns, and now 200 amps from your local transformer can come into your house and fry all your wiring and all your equipment, and your $1 million worth of equipment. Now, the old-fashioned, old, reliable analog meter, the one with the wheel going around, all metal, has a spark gap surge protector. When the voltage rises above a certain level, it jumps that gap and takes it to ground. And it doesn't get hot, whereas smart meters get hot. And it doesn't produce straight current. And that's the low frequency, down around 20,000, 50,000 cycles per second. You need to buy filters. If you got smart meters, you need to buy filters to filter that out. So I bought a $650 kit of smart meter detectors. And I've got a little war going on for myself with the Snohomish County PUD, because we spent $25,000 putting a solar roof on our house. And then they said, well, we're going to hook you up. And so they explained to me that my analog meter would have to go, and I would have to have two non-broadcasting smart meters, one to measure total usage and one to measure the production from the the solar roof. And I don't want a non-broadcasting smart meter on my house because it's not grounded, not sufficiently surge protected, and produces stray current. Now, it doesn't report every few seconds on my usage, but that's the only difference between the non-broadcasting and the broadcasting. And the broadcasting facility can be turned on remotely and you'll never know it. And they collect your information 190,000 times per day. They broadcast back to headquarters your usage, and it's a peer-to-peer network. So the report goes from my house to Mario's house to John's house, and then somebody's smart meter is a reporting meter that then broadcasts it through cell towers back to headquarters. And Google buys that information because they want to know what time you get up, what time you go to bed, I guess, and whether you've got a smart refrigerator yet. You know, there's nothing I really want to say to my refrigerator. You know? I can make my own grocery list.
People used to make believe that was a conspiracy theory that was completely fabricated and only crazy people thought that was happening. But then somebody took apart several appliances and they found microphones and cameras and different things inside of them. It was pretty interesting.
There's nowhere to hide.
No, that's the whole point.
Yeah. So then there's the issue of the fluoride kills the salmon, and so does Roundup. You know, in Washington, our orca whales are dying off because they don't have enough king salmon to eat, and yet we put Roundup everywhere. Golf courses, 20 different chemicals on Linwood's City Golf Course, and you look at the labels and it says kills fish.
But don't worry about it. I mean, as long as it's on the label, it's fine.
So all these little creeks and streams that used to be salmon-bearing creeks run right in the heart of Seattle. Yeah, they're gone. Salmon are gone. Now, the way fluoride kills salmon is that, for example, on the Snohomish River, there are 4 cities which are fluoridated. There's Monroe, then Snohomish, then Everett, then Marysville. And all of them, their water treatment plants, after treating the water, dump it into the Snohomish River. And when the river levels are modest, you know, after the spring runoff, there's enough water. It's all fluoridated. All the water, 99% of the water just goes right down the commode or the dishwasher, and it goes right into the river. And it turns the salmon back, and they just swim in circles, and they die because they're absorbing salts. They're anadromous. They come back from salt water where they excrete salt, and they are capable of switching to absorbing and retaining salts. And fluoride forms a salt in the river, and they absorb it, and they die.
Wow.
And there's scientific studies, fluorideclassAction.com/safe water.
Can I ask a question about a subject you just left before I forget, about your solar roof? And you were saying that they said, well, it's great you have a solar roof, now you need 2 smart meters, and here are all your requirements. Did you not get enough solar capacity to just cut off the grid, or will they simply not let you anyway?
I don't have enough capacity.
Okay.
Now, with us, in the wintertime here, there's not much sun, and I could go with wind, but I haven't studied that yet. I've been too involved in other things. It's just easier right now to keep it turned off until I finish my debate with them, because I'm going to sue them if I have to.
Right.
Because they're costing me money.
And there's no logical reason for anything they're saying, right?
There's no reason why I can't have 2 analog meters.
Right.
They're more accurate. They don't blow up.
It's a big plus.
Yeah. So we've got our Roundup, which so many people have sick stomach. And most of your food is Roundup food. The evil Russia
Right, yeah, that's
has banned Roundup.
Plot, right.
So
Roundup and Russia, they both start with R, you know. I mean, it's pretty much obvious where it comes from.
Many countries are going organic. If it can be grown organically, it should be grown organically. We should have, and the neighborhood should join in, because we all need to eat more vegetables, folks. Vegetables make you healthy. And you'll see some of my videos if you go to jamesrobertdeal.org about, so I always put in some gardening. I do a lot of my videos in the backyard, and I've crudely set up a camera and move it around, and I always introduce my videos by talking about gardening, because even if you live in an apartment, you can still go do gardening. You can take lentils, mung beans, and chickpeas and put them in a bowl of water, change the water twice a day, and in 3 days you now have fresh sprouts, which are the stem cells of the plant world, and they've doubled in mass. So now you've cut your price in half, or you've doubled the value of your money. And they're organic. So you don't need to go to the store to buy your vegetables. You just buy sproutable items.
All right, pretty neat. So what we've looked at is fluoride and microwave radiation, smart meters and Wi-Fi and stuff like that. And you've got at least probably 4 other major elements of that whole concern on your site, right? You're talking about environmental issues.
I'm concerned about another scam is drilling. We now know, in my song, I've got a campaign theme song. You'll see it on the carousel as you go by. And part of the words say, "Hey, Shell Oil, how much did you spend? $8 billion in the Chukchi Sea? You left. You said there was no oil. But really, there's a lot. It was Mother Nature's storms that drove you off. $8 billion would build enough solar power to permanently power 230,000 homes. So instead of drilling and exploring for more oil companies should be putting most of their new capital into solar, wind, wave, and tidal, because that's stable for the future. 1,000 years from now, they're going to ask, well, there's an oil shortage, and we need oil because they can make a lot of valuable products with oil, like the plastics. And what happened to all of it? Well, back in the 21st century, we burned it all. So
doesn't sound incredibly intelligent, right? I mean, if you really thought about that. And the other thing is that there is technology now based on permanent magnets and things like that are even more productive than solar and wind. And those are being violently suppressed along with real health information. And I think that's kind of an interesting issue. The people that try to get into it, they all commit suicide by being shot by somebody else and being poisoned and stuff like that.
Sad.
So I think that's an issue.
There's enough naturopathic doctors getting knocked off that you have to wonder who's doing this. The number is more than coincidence would allow for.
Yeah, about 85 in the last 2 to 3 years in the U.S.
And people ask me if I'm worried about getting knocked off, and I tell them that I had a dream or a vision, and in my dream I said, when I go down this path, the vegetarian path, the anti-fluoride path, is it going to cost me my life? And immediately I had this thought, and I didn't hear a voice or anything. I've never heard voices, all right?
It's okay. We're not turning you in today. It's all right.
Thank you. Or it's committing me. Don't commit me, please.
Right, whatever they do with people.
Immediately this voice came back to me in my mind saying, well, if it does cost you your life, would you then not do it?
Right.
So I thought about it for a while and said, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, since we're leaving at some point, I might as well be able to look back and feel good about what we did, right?
Right. I mean, these interviews are going to be preserved and listened to 500 years from now. They're going to say, hey, Richard and James talked about this, about the correlation of forces and mindless, they're both James and Richard are supporters of private enterprise, if it's an ethically based private enterprise.
Right.
Why can't capitalism needs to figure out how to balance itself and use itself wisely. Another issue that I'm not afraid to bring up, even though my liberal friends say, ooh, conspiracy theory, is the white skies.
Right.
You know, if you think that chemtrails, that's just a conspiracy theory. It just means that you spend too much time looking at the bumper in front of you. You need to look up. And these planes fly over, and it looks like an old 1960s car with a blown head gasket. Regular contrails dissipate immediately. They don't form at low altitudes. At high altitudes, they're gone in a minute or so. These things persist, which is proof that they are something different, because there's some days, like today, sky totally blue, but there's regular air traffic from SeaTac and from Payne Field, but no trails in the sky. But on some days, they come by, and you can go to my website and you'll see white skies, jamesrobertdeal.org/white skies, white-skies. And a professor down in San Diego says they've caught the rain on Mount Shasta, and that what it contains is lots of aluminum and barium and strontium. And these are metals that are more alkaline and are changing the pH and threatening forests. And there are allegedly HARP microwave heaters that belt these, they shoot all these minerals up into the sky, and then the microwave heaters warm them up so they can do things with them and manipulate the weather. And it's a huge fraud, and there's no discussion of it. NASA admits they've been doing it for years. They have used lithium in the past. Right. I don't know if it's dangerous to inhale lithium, but this stuff falls down on you and you inhale it.
It does make it much easier, though. It has the advantage that it's really much more efficient to start fires after that, whether you want to do it in forests or individual houses. Once you metallize the atmosphere, they've been experimenting with that a lot. But yeah, why do you think, you said nobody talks about it. Why do you think almost nobody in office, no representatives in the government, no officials, did none of them notice anything in the sky, or what do you think's going on with that?
My wife and I went on a East Coast trip. We saw Philadelphia and where the Constitution was signed, and went to New York City, and then we went to Washington, and it was a white sky day. You could see the planes flying across like a car with a blown head gasket.
Yeah, it starts out as a line, and then it spreads up the sky.
Why isn't Obama looking out his window to see this and asking, what's going on? Well, here's what happened with coal. Coal fly ash used to go up the smokestack, and then the EPA said, oh, you got to capture it in the wet scrubbers. So they captured it, but then what did they put it in lagoons, and it just piles up. And there was one in Tennessee where the dam broke and flooded a valley. So then the EPA has declared that coal fly ash can be used for pretty much anything. So it's used in making roads. It's used in making wallboard, drywall. So it might be in this house right here, because this house was built in 2007. But another profitable fraud, cash flow that has a life of its own, run amok. EPA has been watered down. So we still on the
EPA has managed to catch people who were surreptitiously trying to collect rainwater on their property, though. Some of those people have been apprehended now. And to be fair, even if fly ash is the body of a lot of the chemtrail residue, which it could be, we've had researchers on the show that have captured the residue and done a lot of analyzing it. Carnicom is the main one. And they found biological weapons in there as well that don't come from fly ash. So there are dry blood cell components and things like that.
Yeah, and where is it manufactured? Who dreams?
That is not a for-profit business. In the obvious way, just to put dried blood cell components in chemtrail residue. There's something else going on there.
I wonder if that's just another way to sell unmarketable, rejected blood cell components.
I don't know. They've also got cross-domain bacteria, which are not biological entities, and they're not chemical entities, and they had to be manufacturing these things, and they weren't a normal waste product even. So I think what's going on is probably deeper than we've found yet. Sorry to be on, but just wanted
it shocks the imagination. You have to wonder who dreams these things up. It's horrific. And which brings me to another topic, which I'm not afraid to speak out about. Now, I definitely know of safe and effective vaccines. And one of the most effective is a vaccine against leptospirosis. And there are many others that have been developed in the tropics. They're double-blind tested. They're taken orally. They don't contain all these metals and aluminum.
They don't go through a needle into your skin, right?
You retain the control over what goes into your body. So, however, none of these safe and effective double-blind tested vaccines are on the CDC approved list. And none of the vaccines recommended for children and adults on a regular basis are double-blind tested. And when I say double-blind tested, I'm referring to comparing A and B populations. One gets the MMR vaccine, the other one gets saline. The way they do their so-called double-blind testing is they have A group that gets the MMR and the B group gets the MMR, but just without the adjuvant in it. I mean, just without the antigen in it. But the same excipients and adjuvants, the metal, the aluminum, the mercury, are all still in it. And then say, hey, we don't have any increased number of sickness in the B group, so therefore it's okay.
Yeah, and they kill the same amount of people, so they're safe.
So they're safe.
Yeah.
And then you have the flu vaccine, which can't be double-blind tested because it takes too long. It changes every year. And the flu is a constantly mutating thing. And then they scare everybody by talking about the flu pandemic of 1918. What most people haven't read the footnotes, and that is that the patent on aspirin expired just a few years before the great flu pandemic. And so people went crazy prescribing aspirin. It brought down the fever and made people a little more comfortable. Now, the typical aspirin tablet, 375 milligrams. You can take one or two. Okay, if you take three, that's a gram. Okay, they were giving people every day the equivalent of 375 milligram aspirin pills, like 30 grams a day. And salicylic acid at that level, that's way exceeds the LD50.
Wow.
So a lot of those people who died of the flu really died of aspirin overdose.
You tell people what LD50 is now, because some don't know.
The lethal dose for 50% of the population. So 50% of the rats die, and the other 15% are sick. And some people can endure more poison than others. But that's a standard tool for measuring toxicity.
Right. And you're mentioning vaccines, that these are some of the main category of doctors that have been committing suicide, were the ones that dared to talk about that. So just an interesting correlation.
There are kickbacks paid to hospitals if they achieve like 90% vaccination rate. And I have a friend who's a doctor, and we talked about that, and he said, "Oh, it's okay to get that extra money." I said, "Well, among lawyers, that would be called a undisclosed bribe."
Yeah, but they don't call it that, so it's all right.
So I go to every clinic, and I call, ring, ring, ring. "Hello, this is Everett Clinic. Press 1 for this and that. Press 2 for your vaccines. And we've got your fluoride, we've got your flu vaccine ready for you anytime you want to come in." And they send me reminders saying I need to get a vaccine, pneumococcal vaccine.
In case you can't make it to the drugstore and get it there, you know.
Yeah, and then you read most people don't read the package insert. With the law that makes them immune from liability, it's not a total immunity. They're immune from liability for negligent manufacture or negligent production. But they're not immune from liability. They're only immune from those liabilities if they disclose the possible harms. So if you read the package insert, it says, and you watch on TV, they say, deaths have occurred.
You're right. It's
So
only
they're
like
doing
1 out of a trillion people, though, so it should be fine.
Well, I want to control what goes into my body. I got a cut, and so I went in and I had it looked at, this was before I really became aware. I let them give me the TDP, the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis.
Right.
Now, pertussis mutates so fast. A lot of kids are already exposed to pertussis and they never had any symptoms. Very few people really get a bad case of it. And if they do, you can take them to the hospital and put them on a respirator. And then they have the wolf. You know, grandma comes to visit the baby and grandma looks like a wolf because she hasn't received the pertussis vaccination. She could infect that poor child. Right. Well, the vaccine does more damage than the disease. And in outbreaks of pertussis, virtually all of the people are already inoculated. So it doesn't work. And it's continuing to evolve. And then tetanus. Tetanus is not contagious. You don't get tetanus from other people. You get it from a deep puncture wound. And you only get it if there is a pocket of infection that's deep and doesn't receive air. And then it sets up a little colony and it produces a toxin. So it's not the disease itself. The disease doesn't spread through the body. It just remains in this one place producing a toxin, which makes you sick and kills you. But you can receive the tetanus toxoid after the cut. So why? It's not a contagious disease. And diphtheria is so rare. And everybody talks about polio. Polio is transmitted through feces, through bad sewers, and filthy water. And so Bill Gates wants to vaccinate everybody in Pakistan and India. And so the Taliban goes out gunning for the vaccine workers, saying that the vaccine is going to make them unable to reproduce. Well, I don't think that's what it's going to do, but it's definitely going to possibly give them a vaccine version of polio. And there's hundreds of thousands of vaccine versions of polio, and they use an oral vaccine, which has been banned in the United States because it's just too dangerous. So double standards. And then Bill Gates sends this tetanus vaccine to Africa, and the African bishops call him on it. And it's a particular type of vaccine that says, don't administer this to women who want to get pregnant. And it's part of Bill Gates' effort to control the world population. And so they had to withdraw it.
But they're now, totally trustable, though.
Oh, yeah, let's trust them. So sometimes people tell me they're trying to kill us. I don't know if they're trying to kill us. I just think they don't care if they kill us. Maybe there's a little difference there. Some of them probably want to kill us. I'm not too worried about getting offed because I'm not proposing the abolition of capitalism. I like the freedom that comes from being able to be in business for myself and form a corporation. I'm just saying that we need to figure out how to be responsible with our private enterprise. So I'm proposing that we change the concept of the corporation. Corporations are chartered by states. All the corporations are chartered by the states except for the federally chartered banks and maybe some others that I don't know about. So that means the state of Washington could say, we're redefining our corporation exemption for avoidance of liability, provided that you have a code of ethics that is approved. Now, what kind of code of ethics would it be? That's hard to say. But in my song, one of the lines is, you can make a tidy profit without fracking up the world. Do unto others applies to all. And it also says, you could... I should know it. It's my song. It'll come to me in a minute.
Okay. Well, yeah, it seems to me that a lot of the laws, if they were actually applied in an objective manner, would get rid of a lot of the toxic corporations even right now, because there are deals being made. For example, the CDC makes a lot of profit, even if it's not called profit, on toxic medicines, and that's allowed to happen. I'm sure it's illegal already, but it's going on all over the place. So it seems to me it's not necessarily the system where you have laws in place already that aren't being used because there's deals between corporations and government. That's not capitalism, that's fascism. Mm-hmm. It's what Mussolini called corporatism. And it's where the corporations and the governments kind of meld together. And then they protect each other and determine what each other's going to do. That would, the quality of ethics in the individuals is going to make a problem in any system. So how do you keep corrupt people out of these positions? I think that would help if we figured that out.
What do you think? What do you think about the idea of having elections where corporations, not people, can't contribute at all? No PACs, just private donations. But we have all these failing newspapers during campaign season. If they could sell these 5x5 ad spaces for each candidate who gets enough signatures, that would help the newspapers, but it would also be an alternative way for people to run without a lot of money. So you would see people who are smart, experienced, wise, and not just political experts. You have to work your way up through the political jungle, and the fix is in.
It is.
Who's going to get nominated?
If you could somehow make the representation of who these people are be real, so it's not just who has a better deal with the media and stuff like that, I think that would be great. The other thing is, if you don't require a lot of money, you have to figure out the mechanics of what happens if you got 10,000 candidates for president, all getting equal coverage.
Well, under this proposal, this is a proposal for governor. You would start off in January, and if you get 10,000 signatures, then you can be included in the first ballot, which is in March. Then you're on TVW, you have a website, you're in the newspapers. And then we have an election in March, and that cuts the number down to maybe 10. And then we have our regular election in August, which is our regular primary, which cuts it down to 2. And in November, we have our top 2 runoff. Now, nationally, it would involve maybe a constitutional change to have more stages in the electoral process, to weaken the powers of the parties.
I can't think of any good reason to have parties, actually. Because you could have a wonderful idea. Why does your party have to represent it? Because as soon as you have the party, there's the question of, do you agree with everything your party says? And they want you to. So I'm not sure if there should be parties. I mean, a lot of the founders of the country warned against it.
I should say a few words about my book. It's called What to Serve a Goddess When She Comes for Dinner.
Yeah.
And it's kind of there's a lot of recipes in the back, but it tells the story of how we could eat in a more healthy way, and about all the notable figures in history who either were vegetarians or near vegetarians. And so I understand that fish are people who live by the sea. That's their main source. And I think that hunting and fishing are less abusive to animals. I'm totally opposed to concentrated feeding operations because they're sources of disease. And they also, those big lagoons where all the poop is eventually break. And in South Carolina, they're flooded with poop anytime a hurricane comes through. So it's a fascinating book in that the group that Jesus came out of were Essene vegetarians, and the documents are very clear to support that. And then the church fathers say that all of the followers of Jesus eschewed a meat diet, and that St. Peter did too. And so people say to me, well, what about the passages in the New Testament where it says Jesus ate fish and he rose from the dead and he was cooking fish? And I said, those two, they're at the beginning of one book and the end of another book, and they were just added later. Because Paul created the Christianity of today. The original Christianity of Jesus did not regard Jesus as a god. He was a special prophet and a priestly messianic figure. But he kept getting ratcheted up. They kept giving him promotions, and he became Son of God. And they say, well, if you're Son of God, gee, that's like your God. So around the year 150, I tell the story of how the church in Rome basically assembled our New Testament. And by the 300s, Jesus was fully co-equal with God. Now, I'm still a follower of Jesus, but I don't think I don't think Jesus is interested in being worshipped. I think he's interested in being followed ethically. And if he's looking over the banister rail up in heaven, he's certainly more interested in your ethical standards and your following high standards of law than what procedures you follow in church and what doctrines about unknowable things that you claim that you know for certain. All this is speculation. We'll find out when we die, if there is a life after death. I certainly hope there is. There seems to be something to reincarnation. There seem to be many people who remember past lives accurately. So maybe that's a little bit of evidence in favor of an afterlife, and I hope that happens. But I know you would enjoy my book. You can go to whattoserveagoddess.com, and it's on Amazon for $22.95, and you can buy the Kindle version for even less. I didn't say anything about abolishing bail. If you're rich and guilty, you can usually get out of jail. If you're poor and it's innocent, but you somehow got arrested, you're stuck. And
boy, that's really, I never thought of it that way. I mean, the amount of bail that's set by the judge, which can be anything within what he's allowed to say, immediately separates the people with money from the ones that don't have any, right?
Right. Now we have ankle bracelets, so people aren't going to run away. And most people let out on personal recognizance show up for the hearing.
And if they're not safe to let out, why should they have bail anyway, right?
Correct. And this leads us to the question of the way prisoners are abused. Prisoner abuse is a great tragedy. They're beaten. Other prisoners, it's a crazy place. They're crowded in there. They beat each other. The prison guards are sometimes masochists. Nonviolent crimes, really, shouldn't be in jail.
Right.
So our prisons need to be reformed, and it would cost a lot less.
I think the vast majority are in there because they used a drug, aren't they?
It's a lot of them. Or selling, small-time dealers.
Right.
I'm in favor of legalizing most recreational drugs. So libertarians like that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Right. And then you go to the state drugstore and you buy your heroin, because people can take heroin and still keep a job. You know, it's the hassle of buying the heroin, getting enough money to buy it, that ruins people's lives, and the infections that they get. But in England, people are on maintenance doses, and but anyway, the state liquor store will sell you the drugs with warning labels, and you sign something saying, I accept the risk. I know that you're advising me I should get off of this. And next door is a clinic, free. So,
well, and it's a separate issue whether you think somebody should be on drugs versus whether they should be legal, right? Because something can be legalized when you think it's a terrible thing to take, but it's not up to the government to decide what decision you make about that. That's really up to you, with the idea of personal freedom, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else.
As long as it doesn't hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
But we are hurting other people by treating these people as criminals.
Right.
I'm also in favor, when I ran for governor in 2016, I championed the idea of a state bank. North Dakota has a state bank, which does some good, but could do much more. And so all this expensive debt that we incur for building projects, and we pay these Wall Street bankers huge numbers of percent off the top, and a high interest rate. If we had a state bank, it'd be a place where all the money going through the state and the cities and the counties could be deposited, and it could be put into very safe investments, and we should build a national wealth fund. Social Security should be diversified. It shouldn't be invested solely in T-bills. We should be invested in the treasury bills of other countries too. And some of the money should be invested in mortgages that have 40% equity in them, so there's no way the government can lose. But people could get a lower interest rate, and then over the period of 20, 50, 100 years, the Social Security could almost become self-supporting. It becomes a national wealth fund. And I think that people should be allowed to put extra money into Social Security to increase the pension that they're going to receive. And I think that if people are in need, if they get in their 40s or their 50s and they've paid substantial amounts in, they should be able to start receiving whatever actuarially is justifiable based on the amount they have contributed. And then you would hope that they would stop taking it once they get back on their job. But it should be treated more in a business-like way. Government should be operated in a more business-like fashion. Right. And business should be operated in a more responsible fashion.
Right. Yeah. Bring in prosperity, but don't do it by, poisoning everybody and doing things like that. Being dishonest. I agree. And I think, too, the idea of silent, very subtle forms of theft through what they call inflation, which is made possible through fractional reserve banking, and the idea even more with the central bank that it can issue money out of nothing, that guarantees that money is worth less and less when that happens. So one of the famous presidents, and I'm really not trying to get kicked off our platform here by talking about, things that are so controversial, but I have this problem about just saying things, that are obvious. And when you give a private business, which is the central bank in this country, it's not part of the government, the ability to issue money that is backed by nothing, which it is since the 60s, then how much profit could that company make? and the value of each dollar keeps going down. It's called inflation that almost nobody understands. And if fractional reserve banking and the central bank were eliminated, money would keep its value. It would be really a different situation. They wouldn't be siphoning off the value of the money to the banks. So the president that I'm thinking of issued an executive order to shut down the central bank right before he was murdered, which I don't think is a total coincidence. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I think
who are you referring to?
JFK.
JFK. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really great president, because not that he was perfect. He had a lot of personal flaws. He made a lot of mistakes. He had socialist leanings that I think weren't good, but he recognized the central bank as the main thief of everybody's wealth. And he actually issued an order to shut it down. And then he disappeared shortly after that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that needs to be revisited.
I'm also in favor of lowering the voting age to 17.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that would be a national effort, because states could have a lower voting age. In fact, there are some cities. There's a city in Maryland called Tahoma that has a 16-year-old voting age for municipal elections.
Oh.
And kids know more at 17, far more than I did at 17. And certainly they know more about computers than most adults.
Right.
They're technologically sophisticated. Most of them work, have driver's licenses.
Yeah.
A lot of them have children.
If they can survive the brainwashing they're getting in the public indoctrination centers, I think they do a really good job. But adults have the same issue.
Yes. Now, one person said to me, my 17-year-old son, he's not very responsible. I said, yeah, there's a lot of 40-year-olds who aren't very responsible.
Right.
And but I know that we need the input from the students because they're still in school. And we know what we need for them to have some authority or power to influence decisions made about schools and education.
That would be great. I would love to see real education started in this country. It would be great.
And I also speak up for the queers of the world, the LGBTQ community, because twice in junior high there were football thugs who accused me of being queer and abused me physically. So I empathize with them. You know, when I was young, I was pretty cute. I was short, slim, kind of looked like a gay boy. And so I was harassed. So we need to take special precautions to educate people and say, look, sexuality is individual. Everybody's different. We're all kind of queer. The rabbis even wrote about it. They referred to it as the strange thought. What is the strange thought, and why does that strange thought excite you? That's the term they use for it. So we're all oriented in different ways. And I think they need special protection because they have been systematically abused, and in some states they still can't. They still can be discriminated against in some states. So I would be on the, if lightning struck and I got elected, I would not be silent about such issues as people who are being abused. And I'm also in favor of teaching nonviolence to students, because students do to each other, children do to each other things that adults would be prosecuted for. And we seem to regard it as okay that they're beating each other up and we just stop them from doing it. But they need to be prosecuted or kicked out of school or put in a different track or something, because personal safety, not having your personal safety violated is a very important issue. So what's your reaction, Richard?
Well, I really believe in teaching not only nonviolence, but also self-defense. and that very important thing to preserve. The founders of the country believed that these rights, including self-defense, did not come from the government. They were born with them. And I think that would make a vast difference if that were supported all over the world, and it's being taken away systematically right now as people are having to defend or depend more and more on the government to protect them. And I'd rather see more self-sufficiency, and I think the best way to teach nonviolence is for the teachers and the parents to demonstrate it, because the kids watch them all the time, and they also watch the media. And I remember even from my youth, which was a long time ago, the big heroes that were promoted by media and Hollywood and everything, they were the ones who could shoot the fastest and kill the most people in the least time. And they were the best. I watched Bonanza every week, and Matt Dillon was real philosophical as he shot all the bad guys, and he was still alive because he was good. And I think the archetypes that are being sold to the kids, they try to live them, and we need to look at the source of those archetypes.
That is a good point. Now, but before Bonanza, there was the Roy Rogers show.
Yeah.
Now, in the Roy Rogers show, whenever people started fighting, other people would grab them and stop them from fighting.
And he also sang a lot of songs, too, on the show.
He was the singing cowboy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of violence in our
I just think
media.
kids try to emulate their role models. And I think a lot of the violence has been purposely revved up by Hollywood and the media. And I'm not talking about censorship. I'm just saying there are connections there that are not just the actions of a free market. There is a coordinated campaign to put out things in society that tend to tear it up. And I'd like to see that remedied.
I had a person call me and ask me if I thought that what I thought about sanctuary cities.
Mm.
I told him that church sanctuary is a long-standing tradition that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, and then it's been extended to cities. And I think cities do probably have some limited legal right to offer sanctuary. Although today it's not really sanctuary that they're offering, they're just offering non-enforcement of federal laws regarding immigration.
Even laws against murder are sometimes not enforced because of that. It's very interesting.
I'd like to learn more about that one.
Yeah, I'll tell you, because we've investigated some cases, and especially if people are in the country illegally and they commit murder, they're often just let off. And this is part of the sanctuary city idea that I don't think is super productive. If giving sanctuary, whether you're a church or a city, should be given to the people who deserve sanctuary. I think that's pretty basic.
Now we've got a border problem, and I probably should say something about that.
Sure.
Because part of the reason why Mexicans and Central Americans are coming up here is economic.
Right.
Now, part of it is that they're afraid for their lives, and they're afraid their children are going to be turned into prostitutes and drug murderers. Right. I've been in Honduras and Guatemala, and I know they're pretty rough places. But regarding the economic migrants, when NAFTA got going, free trade, then we subsidized corn and soy so heavily that the country where corn began can't grow corn economically because it's so cheap coming from the United States. So if we really want to cut down the economic migration, we need to make it possible for small farmers in Mexico to raise their traditional crops. And even the people who raise pork and cattle, American pork is just so much cheaper because they're fed, that Roundup corn and soy. So we need to think about helping Mexico and Central America economically. And then regarding the crime in Central America, the United States has contributed to that partially. because when we catch a drug mafioso who's from Guatemala, instead of dealing with him in the United States, punishing him in the United States, putting him in jail or whatever, they just put him on a plane back to Guatemala or El Salvador. And these people are very experienced with guns and knives. Yeah. So we need to take more responsibility as a country to help their economies, and help their police forces. I think there's a saying.
The best ways of doing that, if they're open to it and not totally corrupt, which most of them are, is to explain the principles of freedom and the stuff that you'd like to see here. Because without that, if you've got a vicious dictator in charge, if you send them money, they'll just keep it for themselves. And if you try to teach them, they'll just laugh. I think it comes down to the same thing, that the quality of individuals in power somehow has to be good. Otherwise, programs don't work. And I'm not saying that to be negative. I just think that's a critical element. You've got to have good people, you know.
So I think I've covered most of the points I am most concerned about. Are you getting any email questions from your listeners that I might address?
Doug, I don't know if the live streams are generating responses. What's going on with that? I think Doug's there somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. There was a question, James, about your website. Someone tried to pull it up on a mobile device and it looked all jumbled. So I don't know if that's something you can address or not. I told him to use a desktop instead because it wasn't for me when I looked at that.
Well, it's supposed to be friendly for cell phones. Okay. And I will check that. And thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. There were some other chat related things going on. Let me pull that back up here and see if there was any actual questions.
That, James, and while Doug looks for that, the reason that I was wanting to get you to see if you'd be willing to come on the air is that what I just said, you to make any of these programs work, you have to have good people that are motivated by wanting to actually help their people. And that's why that doesn't happen much in the U.S. either. So that's why I thought it was really exciting to try to have you on, because clearly you're involved in this because you'd like to make things better. That's like 90% of the requirement. And if you find that in other countries, we can work with them too. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you.
There was one question about how to get the fluoride out of your bones.
You can't get it out of your bones. It's stuck there for life because the pH in your bones is alkaline, and HF, calcium fluoride is the form. Fluoride binds with the calcium. And to release that ionic bond, you would need to acidify it. And it's not going to get acidified inside the bones. So there's a quota, a lifetime quota, and when it's exceeded, you've got brittle bones. I drank Seattle water for 20 years. And that's before I became aware of the issue. And lots, because I would go down, play tennis, and I would take milk jugs and fill them full of tap water and just guzzle water for hours. So I'm partially damaged by fluoride. And so I'm sensitive to it, and I don't want to drink any fluoride or consume any fluoride. Now, in Linwood, we've got a very special place, the Linwood Well, just off of I-5 to the west of I-5 on 164th. It's an artesian well that has wonderful water, 0.07 parts per million fluoride, calcium fluoride. Tap water is 0.7. This is 0.07. So I don't even drink that without using fluoride filter. And for $69, you can go to ProPure and buy a $69 fluoride filter, and you put your tap water in the top, and it filters. I think it's a bone char filter because calcium loves fluoride and fluoride loves calcium. Rather inexpensive. And you should replace, get a fluoride. They also sell fluoride filters to screw onto your shower head. So now you can take a shower without taking a bath in fluoride. Now, to get the fluoride out of your clothes, you're going to need a whole house filter. So you're going to need to spend maybe $3,000 and have it checked every year. So wouldn't it be simpler just not to put it in the water in the first place? Lies can just have so much power and last for so long. Why did it take 50 years to get rid of tetraethyl lead in the gasoline, when adding 10% ethanol to the gasoline stops the pinging just as well? Now, we still allow tetraethyl lead in piston-driven airplanes. There was an exception carved out for them because they figured that it would take them a while to develop engines that didn't need the lead for lubrication. And that exception has lasted. And I think it's time to totally abolish that. And then tetraethyl lead gasoline is still sold in many countries, including Afghanistan.
Interesting.
Okay. And Richard, there was a comment here from Richard White. We know him. He says, they told me when I was a kid 75 plus years ago that you would get polio because of exhaustion. So we would have to come in and take naps in the mid-afternoon so we wouldn't get polio.
Oh.
Wow.
Sounds pretty scientific to me.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, polio is a big scare, and polio is spread through bad water and bad sewers. So polio vaccine is not necessary in the United States, and FDR didn't have polio. You know, back then, anything that caused your legs to stiffen up, your muscles to stiffen up, they categorized as polio. He had a specific disease, I don't remember the name of it, but polio is still common in countries where there are bad sewers and dirty water. So, Gates, clean up the water, clean up the sewers, solve the problem.
Right.
We also need to protect children. There's so much child slavery, prostitution going on. It's horrible. And we need to protect single mothers. They have an instinct to love and raise their children. People ask me about choice versus life, and I tell them I'm pro-choice and I'm pro-life. I want to make abortion very, very rare, and the ways to do that are to educate children at that stage where sex is instinctual and it's a very extremely powerful instinct, and to use the James Robert Deal triple backup method, rubber, foam, at the same time, and don't have sex when she's ovulating. Take great responsibility. And boys, men, it's your responsibility, because a woman in love is pretty defenseless. And so if you're going to be a lover, be a responsible lover. Now, if you're religious and you want to be totally non-sexual, then I think that's fine. I didn't have sex at all until I got married. I grew up in a very conservative Southern denomination, and we sure did a lot of necking, though. But we didn't go all the way. And but anyway, I think that adultery is sometimes unethical, tawdry, insensitive, a violation of your oath to the other party, but we don't prosecute those cases. Even though there's 21 states in the United States where it's still illegal, there are no prosecutions. And it's analogous. I think that abortion is a more serious moral issue, because sometimes there are justifications for adultery. Like in the Philippines, you can't get a divorce, and unless you got lots and lots of money. So marriages are informally dissolved, and maybe there's grounds for people having a partner that they're not married to. Abortion is a serious ethical issue. But the question is, do we resolve that problem by passing strict laws against it, even the strictest of laws are still going to make exceptions for the life of the mother or in case of incest or rape. So now we're going to need an abortion court, which is expensive, takes a lot of time to make decisions. And most women are very child-loving and very instinctually very protective of life, and they will make probably the same choice that a judge would make. So let's leave the choice up to the women. But at the same time, educate people about being careful and responsible, especially men. And I've proposed the idea of mother-child adoption. Usually in cases of unwanted pregnancy, we talk about adopting the child to be born. I think what we should do is have, for people who are really sensitive to this issue, have people of means adopt not only the child, but also the mother. You expand the size of your family. You can give the mother the extra support she needs. And now you've got another daughter and a grandchild.
Wow, that's it. I've never heard that idea anywhere. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, it came out of one of my meditations.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah. It's good to cross your legs and think about these things, because there are other solutions.
Yeah. I mean, one of the aspects of pro-choice is you do have the choice whether to have sex, and if you choose to have it, then you have to be ready for the possibility that it may bring another life into the world. The other thing to remember is that especially as Roundup and all these other things do their job and cause sterility along with the vaccines and everything else, there are a lot of parents willing to pay money to adopt children. And there should be centers, I think. If we're going to have centers to help women around the country, which is a great idea, why can't they mostly bring the women together with the desperately wanting adoptive parents who will even pay for everything and let them know each other exist, instead of saying, 5 minutes, we'll kill your child. No problem. We'll just call it abortion and call it a piece of tissue. It's no problem. Instead of that, which the government, it's not about outlawing abortion, it's the government gives those companies $500 million a year out of taxes, and they're doing tens of millions of abortions. That's not outlawing it to decide that. But they're not telling the mothers about the parents that really want to adopt. And adding your idea would be even better.
Now, adopting a child is a very complicated process. However, adult adoption is really simple. You don't need any parental consent because the person's at 18. She gives her own consent. So adopt the mother and maybe not even adopt the child.
Wow.
But the child becomes your grandchild legally.
Yeah.
It can inherit intestate.
Right.
So you've enlarged the size of your family. You've done a good work. And I think Jesus would be proud of you.
I completely agree with you. I think that's an incredible idea. Just that one innovation is, incredible value out of our discussion. So everybody needs to know about it.
We need to get these homeless people off the street. Now, if we had a Washington State bank, the bank could make low interest rate loans to build housing, and people say, where? Let's not destroy single family neighborhoods. I don't think we should need to destroy single family neighborhoods. We need to go 20 stories high and put it along major thoroughfares and have 150 square foot apartments for singletons and 300 square foot apartments for mother and child, and all different sizes of apartments. And people would pay 1/3 of whatever their income is. So if they're just getting Social Security disability, 1/3 of that. And it would go up as they get a job. They're more likely to get a job if they live in a secure place rather than in a tent.
So it's like the idea of the tiny homes, right, that are being put on trailers or the back of trucks and stuff. I think compared to living on the street, a small apartment would be incredible. I mean, it would be like super luxury, this big step up.
We have some of those in Seattle, but not enough. And in theory, it could support itself, because people will have some income, and once they're in a safe place, they have possession. They're safe in their possessions. And you should not make it a condition that they become drug-free. They're more likely to become drug-free, clean and sober, if they have a safe place to stay.
Right.
But they would have to. They can't stay there if they're going to be violent in any way.
Right. Yeah. No, that would ruin it for everybody.
So the theme song for my campaign is "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." So if you go to my website, you just stop the carousel going around. It says campaign theme song, and you can listen to it. And you can go to whattoserveagoddess.com, and all of my songs are posted there.
You write these songs, right?
Yes.
That's what makes them your songs.
The music and the words.
Wow. Do you perform them at all?
Yeah. I'm a better pianist than I am a guitarist.
You do vocals as well or not?
I do. I'm a grumpy bass, but.
All right. So where can people hear your music?
Whattoserveagoddess.com, and on the top, you'll see songs by Jimmy Deal. My dad was a musician.
You're looking up where people can hear the songs?
Yeah.
I think the idea that's probably connected to your obvious compassion as a human being, because when you get away from the strictly intellectual world and go into music, it's a carrier of emotion that I think is missing from a lot of speeches of candidates and things like that. It's not real.
But the whole thought of the song is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Profits must be goal number 2 after doing something good for the world. You can make a tidy profit without fracking up the world. Do unto others applies to all. Do unto others applies for our descendants, our sons and our daughters for the next 10,000 years. Do unto others applies for all. Hey, Mr. Rich Guy, I'm talking to you. Hey, big company, I'm talking to you. Hey, big government, I'm talking to you too. Do unto others applies to all. Hey, Monsanto, where's your code? Your code of ethics, you should have one. Hey, you fraudulent seller of carcinogenic Roundup. Monsanto, where's your code? Hey, ExxonMobil, look up, not down, to solar and wind and wave. Stop drilling now. The future is green. Be a big green energy company. Hey, Atlantic Richfield, stop your fracking ways. Your methane is even worse than your CO2. Stop poisoning the water. Stop poisoning the air. Be a big green energy company. Hey, Shell Oil, how much did you spend? $8 billion in the Chukchi Sea? You left. You said there was no oil, but really there's a lot. It was Mother Nature's storms that drove you off. $8 billion would build enough solar power to permanently power 230,000 homes.
I like it. The other category of people that should be included in your list of who should do unto others is the people who think they're powerless and they don't have money and they're oppressed and there's nothing they can do but wait for help, but actually they have a lot of power, and how they treat the person next to them, even if they're on the street, really matters. So sometimes people have this, preconception that all the people with means are the bad ones, and then you get mugged by a person who doesn't have anything. And I think those people can set an example too. You don't have to wait till you're making enough money to be kind to everybody else. Right?
That's a very good summary of my philosophy. I am less worried about what St. Peter is going to say at the pearly gates when I show up than to how I will feel on my deathbed as to whether I did the best I could.
Exactly. And every second counts for that.
So I want to applaud greatly the work that you're doing, Richard. This is very important, and keep it up. And don't give up. And let's hope that an awakening comes in our lifetimes.
Yeah, like soon in our lifetimes. And if we disappear from certain platforms because they don't want to hear this stuff, go to real.video, and we're going to find other ones too. Don't lose us. LostArtsRadio.com. You'll see where we went, and we'll keep the message out there.
Okay. Thanks so much, Richard.
That was great, James. And hold on. After we're going to wrap it up now, and you can hang up, but we're going to get back to you in about 15 minutes and ask you to say a few words to the Planetary Healing Club that is waiting for a message from you. But we'll call you back for that.
Okay. So I'll wait for your Skype call?
Yeah, Skype. 15 minutes at the most.
All righty.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
See ya. Okay, guys, that was James Robert Deal. I thought that was incredible. And, you know, we're not looking for somebody to be in political position that has the right policy on everything, because I wouldn't, and nobody I know would. And we're all trying to search for better and better solutions to everything. But what I am interested in people of power, not just in official government, but in corporations, is intent. I think that's what makes somebody great, whether they're in the local city council or the county commissioners or the president of the United States or Senate or whatever. You know, Senate is what James is running for. But it's intent, because if you're there because of what he expressed his desire was to look back when he's dying and seeing that he did the best he could for other people. Forget the labels. It's the quality of intent like that that leads you to the best use of your time. Every single one of us, that's just as important as somebody in the Senate or whatever. So if any of you run into people running for office that would like to get into more discussion of details and have our support and really let people know what they're talking about, what we're looking for is people who want to do something good, you know, not in the sense of just a superficial campaign slogan, or something like that. But when you talk to them, you can tell. And you know, James is doing this and spending his own money as part of his pro bono work, like he explained. You know, the medical doctors used to have to spend about a third of their time working for free. They weren't worried about all this insurance nonsense and getting the government involved, who then, as soon as they are behind the insurance and the policies, they come in, what can be treated, how it can be treated, that you have to do drugs instead of homeopathy or fasting or whatever. The free market for medicine is far superior to any government program. But everybody used to understand in private business that you give part of your time as charity, because it helps you to do that. It helps your internal well-being, your character and all that. That's the kind of people that we want in these positions of power that no sane person would ever really want to be in for their own sake, but they do it to serve other people. So we're going to keep looking for candidates like that. We've got some, and they can be in office already too. We'll support them just as much. There are some in Idaho, for example, that have been on the show before and will be again. So stay in touch. If you think anybody's great that you know of, send me their name, a description of what they're doing, why you think they're great. Richard@LostArtsRadio.com. And remember that, and the same with any comments, questions, complaints, whatever you want to communicate is great. That's fine. Watch our Facebook page, Lost Arts Radio Facebook page, and you know about the YouTube channel if you're watching the live stream. We're on Twitter for the moment anyway. We're really excited about our presence on Real Video now. Open source truth, yeah, but Real Video is specifically to combat censorship, so they need your support. Our friend Mike Adams is behind that one. And anyway, just stay in touch, and then if you want to learn about the club, I think you'll see something posted under the recording of this live stream. It's at lostartsradio.com/club if you want to get deeper into all this stuff personally. And I just really appreciate you letting us spend time with you and share these things that we're discovering. So we help each other. That's the whole idea. Thanks for being with us. Have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.